Hey guys, this is Jim from Performance Tread. We're here at Palm Beach International Raceway. Behind us here they're running a couple of events, open track day, and we're standing here actually by the opening of the drag strip. But I wanted to talk to you guys today about tires. I constantly get questions about setup, what tires should I use, which is the best tire. Very broad spectrum questions, and there is no easy answer. We brought some examples here today that we're going to talk about in detail, but tires are probably the most important modification of the car. But there are a lot of factors that determine what type of a car and what type of a tire you're going to use, starting with what type of car it is, what the organization you're running. Is this a tire that you're going to use for daily driver? You're going to drive the tire to the track? Are you only going to do club events like this, high performance driver education stuff, track days? Are you going to compete with the tire? Are you racing wheel to wheel? Are you doing time trials, etc., etc.? So there are a lot of factors to consider. The most important thing about a tire is you need to understand that you can have the best set up car in the world, okay? But you have a contact patch that's quite small, which is what connects the car to the road. If that contact patch is not the optimal grip, then you're going to have a problem. There are different tires that you can use for different cars. However, the conditions may change. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about one of the things that is going to affect what type of racing tire you use, or what type of tire you use in general. Let's talk about racing. If it's a spec class, like for example Spec Miata, you're going to have to use a Toyo RA1. You really don't have a choice in the matter. You can't use any other tire. You have a shaved example here. We have a full treaded example. A little used, but I think you get the idea of the tire. We're going to talk more about these tires in detail in a minute. All right. So in the spec class, you're pretty much stuck with that particular tire. If you're time trialing, you obviously want to use the fastest tire possible, softest rubber, ideally in most situations. We have two types of tires here. We have a Hoosier R6 and a Goodyear RS, the AC compound, or what they call the autocross compound. Yeah, which is designed to be sticky right off the get-go. This is the softest rubber and the stickiest rubber that you can probably use. Or you can use a Hoosier A6, which is exactly the same tire as the R6 here, but it has a softer rubber. Now, depending on the type of track that you're on, and depending what the rules within that organization and the class that you're running, you're going to have to make a decision which tire to use. But both of these tires are very sticky. But typically in time trials, you have a choice of tire. In NASA, when we time trial our Evo, you can use pretty much any tire you want, but there are points that you're assessed depending on the tire. Obviously, the stickier the tire, the more points you're going to incur, which may or may not bump you up to another class. So those are some of the decisions that you would need to make. But there are differences between the tires, and we're going to talk about it in detail in a minute. Now, let's just suppose that you want to drive a tire that you can that you want to bring to the track. You have no trailer, and you're going to drive your car. It's your daily driver. Obviously, you can't use any of these tires because even though they're DOT rated, I wouldn't advise driving these to the track for a couple of reasons. Number one, if it rains, you're foobarred. You're really going to be in a world of trouble trying to get home. Secondly, if you have a problem, you're not going to be able to get home. And thirdly, on the way to the track, if you have a puncture, you pick up something on the road, and you can ruin your whole weekend. Luckily, if we're doing trackside support, we're at the track and we have another set for you, that'll be great. But if we don't, then you're going to be in serious trouble. It can really spoil your weekend. So you probably want something that's relatively sticky, that has some sort of tread. So if it rains, you can drive the car home with some relative safety. It'll be slow, but you won't jeopardize your safety by driving these in the rain, because these are practically undrivable in the rain. Alright, so let's talk a little bit now about some of the other factors that are going to determine what type of tire you use. How heavy your car is, your driving style, do you like a soft sidewall, how much camber you're running in the car, etc., etc. Obviously, let's take let's take a tire that you drive to the track but it's also your daily driver. Well, if you run 3.5 degrees of camber in the front, when you put on your street tires, it's going to really wear out the tires. Now, unless you're prepared to change the camber before and after you take the car on the track, then obviously it's not going to be very conducive for daily driving. But a tire, for example, such as the Hoosier R6 or A6, is going to demand at least 3 to 3.5 degrees with the camber because of the construction of the tire. There are a lot of factors. We're not going to go through everything today, but you can always get a hold of me, Jim at performancetread.com, and you can ask me any questions and we can talk more in detail. We can probably make a video that can be hours long discussing what type of tire would be the right tire. Alright, so now let's talk a little bit more specifics about the tires. Just understand, now one of these tires is going to be, am I going to say this is a better tire than this tire and so on and so forth, but there are some differences that are going to determine which tire is going to best work for your vehicle, depending what type of car you have and the use you're going to have, and how the car is set up. Let's talk about the Hoosier. As a general practice, I will say the Hoosier makes the best DOT racing tire on the market. The R6 and the A6 are probably the most race tire on the market, and there's a reason for that. They've been doing it for a very long time. Race tires typically have very strong sidewalls. However, the Hoosier is actually a little bit softer. You can see I can actually push it in a little bit with my hand. Okay, now let's compare that to a Goodyear. The sidewall is extremely stiff. Okay, so what does that mean exactly? Well, you have more flex on the sidewall, you're going to build more heat into the tire. You also want to have a little bit more camber on the Hoosier, for example, than you would on the Goodyear, so you can keep the contact patch on the road. Okay, because you can have some more squirming on of the tire, as opposed to Goodyear. Goodyear has a very stiff sidewall, so you could probably get away with a little bit less camber. Now this is the AC compound, so it's a softer compound than this R6. Now assuming that we had an A6 here, which would be a very comparable tire to this one, it would really depend on the setup of your car and really your driver style to see which tire is going to be faster. I will know more about the AC compound in October, as we're going to do a tire test for Goodyear at Sebring, and we're going to see how that pans out compared to the A6, which we hold the track record with the A6 at Sebring on our Evo. So we're going to see how this pans out, but I'll be able to tell you more details. But honestly speaking, these are great tires, and one thing to remember, if you're going to run a softer compound, this is a constant question that I get. A softer compound means you're going to have more grip. Tire is not going to last as long. Okay, as a general rule of thumb, the harder the tire, the less grip, the more you go to, the longer it's going to last. All right, and then there's heat cycling involved, some other things that we're not going to get into right now. But again, like I said, you guys can email me, Jim at performancetread.com, and we can go into greater detail discussing which tire would be the best use for what you're doing on the racetrack. So let's move over here. Let's talk a little bit about these Toyos now and what the differences are. Believe it or not, these are two identical tires. This one here is shaved at 4/32. You can see that most of the tread's gone. This here is a full treaded used. In the spec class, like Spec Miata, for example, you would use this, a fully treaded RE1, as a rain tire. Okay, obviously the more you shave it, the better this tire is going to hold. At 4/32, you eliminate most of the treads, and it ends up looking kind of like the Goodyear or the Hoosier. That being said, the tread wear on these are a little bit higher, so this is a little bit harder compound. All in all, though, terrific tire, holds up very, very well. You get more heat cycles out of this than you would out of Goodyear or Hoosier, of course, but they're not going to be as sticky as the Goodyear or Hoosier. But these are what calls a spec class. These are the tires that they call for, and that's what you have to use. I think they use them in specking, I know they use them in specking 30 BMW classes. They also use them in spec Miata and a couple other classes, I think American Iron and so on and so forth in NASA. Now, that being said, what makes this tire not grip the road and dry as good as this tire? Well, for starters, you can tell here by shaving we have more surface area. So obviously you're going to have a bigger contact patch with this tire than you will here, because you have a lot of different grooves in the tread pattern, okay? Also, these tread blocks that are formed with the tread pattern on here cause what's called squirming. In other words, these will move. Anytime you move something, it's going to generate heat. You end up overheating this tire in the dry, and of course it's going to get slick on you. The bigger the tread blocks, the smaller tread blocks, the more tread blocks, the faster the tire is going to overheat. Tires they're very sensitive to their operating temperature. So it's very, very important that you keep them within that spec. Again, we could talk a lot in detail about that. I encourage you again to email me at jim@performancetread.com, and then I'll be able to tell you more about, talk more in detail about that. Alright, the last thing I want to talk about is tread wear. One of the things that's a little bit deceiving, and this is very, very important that you guys know this, is to talk about tread wear numbers and really what do they mean. For example, the Toyo is a tread wear, 100 tread wear, as opposed to, let's say, a Hoosier R6 or the Goodyear R30 or lower, okay, which means it's going to be sticky as heck. It's important to know that you can get two identical tires as far as tread wear. In other words, two different makes, let's say a Nito and a Toyo. They both have 100 tread wear, but one may hold better than the other. One may give you better longevity than the other. The reason for that is there's no standard of measurement, in the sense that there's no independent laboratory that establishes these tread wear numbers. Each company establishes those numbers on their own. So for example, a 100 tread wear tire from one company may be stickier than, let's say, an 80 tread wear tire from another company. And just to throw just some numbers out there, just so you understand what I'm talking about. Anyways, this is the very broad spectrum, some answers to the questions. I hope it helps some of you. Again, like I said, you guys can email me, jim@performancetread.com, and we can get into more specifics about tires. But in the broadest sense, I hope that answers all your questions.